Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to David's Den. I am David, and today we're going to be doing an adaptation correlation for The Shining. Now, if you don't know, The Shining was a 1977 book by Stephen King about a haunted hotel, really about a man trying to overcome his alcoholism and his fears of fatherhood, succumbing to his demons, but you can check out this video about the autobiographical nature of the book to the author Stephen King at the time of its writing. If you would like to know more about that, I've kind of analyzed it to death, so I don't want to get into that in this video. However, those exact themes are the reason that Stephen King hates Stanley Kubrick's 1980 film adaptation of The Shining.
I really enjoyed The Shining. I think that was my favorite of all of your books. But I really hated the movie. And after persuading my husband for months to take me to a movie and encouraging him that he was going to love this, we were both terribly disappointed. And I was really wondering what your opinion of the movie was, since you didn't write the screenplay.
Well, I felt a little bit as though I had given Stanley Kubrick a live hand grenade and he had heroically thrown his body on it. I think that it's a lovely movie to look at. It has those luscious, long tracking shots, and you get to follow the little kid along on his tricycle, and it's going along and going over the hardwood floors and then the rugs. But one of the things that I think is very, very necessary for any kind of a horror movie or a horror novel or a horror short story is that you have to feel something for the people involved. Because if you don't feel anything, then there isn't any horror. I don't think there's any horror without love, because without love, everything would be horror and we wouldn't have any basis for comparison. You know, we'd be like rats in a Skinner box and it wouldn't make any difference.
There were a number of things that kind of changed, and because the book was so personal in nature to Stephen King, what's interesting about it is he's had so many of his books adapted into film or television series. There's even a program where he gives film students the rights to adapt his short stories into short films for only $1. So there are numerous adaptations of Stephen King's work over the last, 40 years. However, he's never been quite so outspoken about disliking a film so much as Stanley Kubrick's. And we're going to get into those themes and why that is here in just a second. Because what I'm trying to introduce is that Stephen King wanted to make another adaptation. He wanted one that was a little more faithful to the original meaning and themes and tone even of the novel. So, in 1997, ABC premiered a mini-series adaptation of The Shining starring Rebecca De Mornay and Steven Weber and written by Stephen King himself. And to finish it off, it was directed by Mick Garris, who had a tremendous success with The Stand, also on ABC, a few years earlier. If you want to know a little bit about the history of that, I have some fun facts coming for you and behind-the-scenes stuff in my next video, or maybe the last video. It all depends which one I edit first. I've been promising this video for a while, so probably this one's going to be coming out first, just because I feel bad that it's not out yet. Okay, so what I would like to do is examine how the miniseries is successful in translating the original themes from the novel to the screen, and in that we're going to talk a little bit about Stanley Kubrick's version and why it was so different. Spoiler for the end of this review, this is a successful adaptation. I have some problems with the film as a film or miniseries, and for those you can check out my review of it as if it was a standalone project, as if it was not based on a book, just on the merits as a miniseries or a movie. But that being said, overall, this is a successful adaptation. When it comes to theme, when it comes to tone, mostly when it comes to plot, there's a very big omission that I have a little bit of a problem with, but I also understand why it was omitted, and we'll get there in a minute. And also the ending. I think that it works for the themes, and again, we're going to get there, but I want to give a spoiler warning, and we're not there yet. So there's going to be some spoilers. This would be a good time to tell you. If you haven't read the book, if you haven't seen the miniseries, you might want to turn this video off. And then come back when you've read it. The bottom line is that this is a very successful adaptation. I want to examine that just a little bit further and talk about why it's successful, and then talk about some notes that I made, that I have right here, about certain changes and certain moments that really work to capture the novel's theme and tone. Okay, that was a long-winded intro. Here we go. The overall theme of The Shining as a novel is that a man who is suffering from alcoholism and trying to stay sober, who also has demons from his own personal past that whisper in his ear and make it hard for him to stay away from the bottle, is driven mad by his own thirst, as it were. And that destroys his family. This is actually a larger metaphor for alcoholism as a disease that can tear families apart. At the time that Stephen King wrote this novel, he was also a new father, and he was worried about his ability to be a good dad, especially given his own personal history of his father running out on them, not growing up with a lot of money, and just, he had a hard life when he was a child living with his mother, who bent over backwards for him. And as with any father, there are fears. Am I going to lose my temper and hit my child when I don't want to? I have this disease of alcoholism.
Hi, my name's Jack. I'm an alcoholic from Vermont. This is my first meeting in Sidewind.
Which Stephen King did at the time. Well, I mean, he still does. It never goes away, but now he's in recovery. These are all part of the book, right? And a big part of that is that the hotel does not want Jack, right? It uses Jack to get to Danny. Now, within the plot, the hotel wants Danny because his shine, his ESP, gives it more power to come to life, right? But in terms of the metaphor, it is manipulating Jack to get to Danny. It is manipulating Jack to kill his wife and his child.
He's crossed you at almost every turn, hasn't he?
That he has.
He must be corrected, sir. He and your wife both.
This is the driving force of the novel as a whole. When we start the book, Jack is a redeemable character. He's had some bad luck. He's had the incident with George Hatfield, the student that he beat. He's had a couple of, bottom moments, rock bottom moments, especially when he hits the bicycle, which, by the way, first change, I am very mad, is not in this movie. I have a whole video about a fan theory on the bicycle, which has since been disproven because now I'm reading the newest one, Billy Summers, and The Overlook is mentioned. But that actually doesn't disprove my theory. Yet. It or Misery might disprove my theory. Anyway, for that theory, check here. Now, I understand why this wasn't in the film adaptation. He hits this kid on a bike while his friend does. They're in the car together. While they're drunk, the kid is nowhere to be found. It's apparently just a bicycle that was standing in the middle of the road at 3 a.m. And it's Jack's rock bottom moment. It's when he says, I'm going to sober up, right? The George Hatfield incident, where he hits the student, works just as well as a rock bottom moment. And if we're going to trim some of the fat away from this book, the bicycle never comes back, and it just doesn't. Its only purpose is to serve as a rock bottom incident. And on film, we can get that with the George Hatfield incident. So I am not necessarily upset or mad at the change, but I personally, as a reader who loved that moment in the book and think it means so damn much, am really pissed off. Stephen King. Okay, so as I was saying, Jack starts as a redeemable character. Yes, he's hit rock bottom. Yes, he's had some bad moments. He talks about his history of abuse in his family and the time that he accidentally, but probably on purpose, he admits later, broke his son's arm when he was 4, right? The way that it was done in Stanley Kubrick's vision, in his adaptation, was that Jack is terrible right from the beginning. He didn't like that there wasn't alcohol, but he didn't care if he drank or didn't. He was an asshole to his family, to his wife, to his child, right from the very start.
Don't be so grouchy.
I'm not.
being grouchy. I just want to finish my work.
We do not root for him as a protagonist in Stanley Kubrick's film. We worry about his family. We wonder what's going to happen to him, but we do not root for him to succeed, to overcome his demons, his disease. In the book, we do. And that, I think, is the main difference between the book and Stanley Kubrick's version, and why Stephen King wanted to rewrite it. So now, in Steven Weber's Jack Torrance, we have a redeemable character. Checking my notes. There's also themes about the effects of alcoholism on our children, the silent legacies and scars, emotional scars that we leave behind on our children, sometimes in spite of our best intentions.
Children will listen.
And again, that doesn't exist in Stanley Kubrick's version. Jumping ahead a bit, at the end of Kubrick's film, Jack succumbs to his disease. He ends up in the hotel where the alcoholism wanted him. His family gets away. In the book, maybe they get away, but they're left scarred for life. Even to the point where Stephen King had to write a sequel about what Danny Torrance was going through as an adult called Dr. Sleep that came out, I believe, in 2012. So by changing the ending, by changing the ending, it literally changes the entire theme of the story. And when it comes to this version of The Shining, the miniseries in 1997, all of those themes are retained, probably because the author of the novel adapted it himself. Now, with all of that being said, what I'm going to do is go through my notes, which are pretty much in the movie order, and I'm going to make some comments about how those moments serve as successful adaptation pieces. For example, while we're on the topic of theme, there's a moment, it's so beautiful, where, if you remember the moment in the elevator, this is in part 3 of the miniseries, the moment where they find the confetti and the party mask in the elevator from the ghosts, Danny puts it on, and then this conversation happens.
What are you doing, Doc?
Being someone else so it won't bother me. And she yells, or you push. Being someone else, sometimes that's better.
Oh my God. And then Jack cares for him. He stops worrying about the hotel, the metaphor for his disease, his alcoholism, and the family unit is solid again for a moment. There's another section also in part 3 where we hear this.
He has a great talent. The manager has special plans for him. You must deal with him firmly.
I will.
The hotel wants his son. The hotel is manipulating Jack, right? This all serves to support the successful adaptation of these themes that I was talking about from novel to movie. And then again, at the end, there's a scene in the book where Jack sacrifices himself. He has the roque mallet. Okay, we're jumping ahead. Another big problem. Can no prop department on a film set figure out how to make a roque mallet? In Stanley Kubrick's version, he goes with an axe. In this version, there's something called Denver croquet, which is an oversized croquet mallet.
Twice ordinary croquet size, as a matter of fact.
In the book, it's roque. And in roque, the mallet looks like one end is a croquet mallet and the other end is an axe. Why can't someone just build the prop if you can't find it? That kind of pissed me off on both adaptations. But yes, so in the book, he's standing there, bloodied, and Danny basically says, "This isn't you, Daddy, this is the hotel." And he realizes what's happening. And he sacrifices himself, saying,
"Run away. Quick, and remember how much I love you."
Before aiming the hard side of the roque mallet at his own face. In the miniseries, there's something similar. He does sacrifice himself, but not in the same way. I do think seeing him actually beating himself to death with a mallet would have been so much more horrific, and I think that it's so much more poignant in terms of the one thing that Jack is refusing to sacrifice is his son.
Kiss him. Kiss him.
That's
That's what I've been missing.
He refuses to leave the legacy to his children that he was left by his father. Just like Stephen King doesn't want to leave the legacy he was given by his parents to his children. So again, it all comes back to that personal nature. And I'm repeating myself, I'm rambling. I'm going to get back to my notes here. So at the very beginning of the film, we get almost all of part one condensed into about 10 minutes, which is perfectly fine. We get the speech from Ullman. We get the visit from Tony to Danny, showing him not to go to the Overlook. Wendy is now a painter for some reason. I mean, I don't mind it. I think it actually gives the actress something to do, some busy work and something to work with. So I kind of love that they gave Wendy a hobby of being a painter in this. Thank you. That was actually a nice touch that made her a little bit more of a real person, which is another problem that King had with the Stanley Kubrick film, that Wendy was just this weak-willed woman who kind of went along with what she was told by Jack, by the doctor. Even her own son kind of can run her around, when in the book, sorry for the rustling, there's a cat getting into a box behind me. What do you have? Oh no, he doesn't have anything. So in the Kubrick version, she's just a weak kind of character that's strung along. In the book, and definitely in Rebecca De Mornay's performance, as Stephen King wrote it for the miniseries, she's a little more strong-willed. Strong-willed. She stands up to Jack. I mean, she also kind of says, I love you and we're a family and we have to look out for each other and I'm here for you, so I will take a back seat. But we know that that's by choice, not a personality trait. It actually takes strength to do that. So that the opening is condensed, and I think it's done beautifully. It gives us all the exposition that we need, quickly, succinctly. It doesn't take much time. We get the flashbacks over Elliot Gould's speech about the George Hatfield incident. So we are primed, right? And we can just start the story, which is pretty amazing, I think, because there's a lot of information from the book that got translated very well to film if some of the dialogue seemed a little pushed. Again, check out the film review. I'm not going to get into all of that here. Some positive similarities. There is a 5-act structure in the book that is translated to a 3-act structure for the miniseries. Act 1 and 2 is part 1, Act 3 is part 2, and Act 4 and 5 is part 3. Did you follow that? So I think that it translated very well in terms of being a miniseries when it comes to structure. I love the way that there's still old rundown cars from the 60s and 70s and that Jack's still in a Volkswagen, even though the film was updated to take place in present day in the 90s when it was filmed. The Wasps Nest. Thank you, God. There is a huge metaphor, and Stephen King has even said it himself in some of his speeches and keynote addresses, that the wasps represent the hotel coming back to life.
When I wrote The Shining the first time, the wasp's nest that Jack finds in the roof, the one where the wasps come back to life and sting his son in the middle of the night, that was there strictly as something that intensified the suspense, that made the tale-telling more personal and vital between me and the person that I call constant reader. Later on, thinking about what I'd written in a cooler frame of mind, it struck me that the wasps served as an adequate symbol for the pass-it-on nature of abuse. What we are able to live with as adults, what doesn't sting us, as the wasps in the nest won't sting Jack after they've stung his son, will sometimes sting our loved ones, as we ourselves were stung when we were younger. And the nest that comes back to life when it's supposed to be dead also expressed the nature of the overlook to me. And it seemed to me, too, that it was a viable way of expressing what I felt emotionally about ghosts and what ghosts are, if they are.
There's a part where it's literally on Jack's hand and we get...
Sting me. Why don't you sting me now?
Brilliant, wonderful adaptation into the film, and f*** you, Kubrick, for thinking that that wasn't important. Kubrick. Although that's a fantastic movie, one of the greatest of all time. I don't want to belittle it. It just sucks as an adaptation. Some other really positive adaptations. We have Jack saying, I'm sending you to Wendy, and our son to your mother's if I hit him again or have any sort of accidents or slips. Another really successful part of this adaptation, besides just Room 217 being the ultimate demon, the disease itself that will stop at nothing to get to Danny, even psychically calling him somehow in the middle of the movie. But hey, it works, right? But besides 217, we get all of those symptoms, and they even call it out. Wendy says,
"You're not drinking anymore, but all of your old drinking habits are back. If that's what this place is doing to you, then I think coming here was a really bad idea."
Just like she does in the book. He starts chewing Excedrin, he starts wiping his lips. All of these habits come back. Great characterization. I wish a little bit more was made out of it in the film. I think it was just a little too subtle to really be caught until Wendy says something. Now, there is an addition to the film of Jack going to AA meetings, to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, which is, by the time we get to the miniseries, the time that Stephen King was writing it, he had gone to AA. He had been through the program. He had done his 12 steps. At the time that he wrote The Shining, he had not. So I really love that Stephen King kind of updated the story for what Jack would really be doing once he had the experience to draw from. So kudos Stephen King on that. I think that that was a brilliant adaptation. It also gives us those great moments where Jack is fighting and we can visually see him in a visual medium rather than in a book, flipping through the big book for AA, right? We can see him going to those meetings in Sidewinder before they get snowed in at the hotel. Now, there are also some deletions I really missed. First off is those hedge animals. Now, I agree with it because the CGI was not up to par at that time, and it would have just looked silly. What they did already looks a little silly, but I forgive it for being the time, and it was used sparingly, so I'm actually okay with it. I think it worked out well. But there's a moment where Danny is in one of those concrete cylinders that kids can crawl through on a playground, right? And of course, there's a moment with a ghost, and there's a kid that died out there, we find. And the hedge animals come to life around him. We don't get that cylinder moment in the book. We don't get the moment with Dick Halloran coming back to rescue them at the end, and the hedge animals like almost pulling his clothes off and have his pants being in tatters and his legs shredded from the lion claws, I believe it was. We don't get Jack's third incident with the hedge topiary, and I really, really miss it. But I also kind of understand it. Another deletion that bothered me was that fire hose. We get this terrible CGI snap at the beginning as an homage to the hose turning into a snake and chasing Danny in the hallway in front of 217. And the only reason I really have a problem with that scene being deleted is that the original inspiration for Stephen King to write this at all was staying in the Stanley Hotel and having a dream in this empty hotel that his son was being chased by the fire hose. So I really, in terms of an homage to the original inspiration, I wish that it had been there. And the reason it wasn't is because the CGI was going to be way too expensive in 1997 for this one scene of a fire hose coming to life, to which I say, whatever happened to practical effects? Put a goddamn string on that fire hose and shake it around. They would have done that in 1952 and it would have looked great. You could do it in 1997. But at the beginning of CGI, no one wanted to do practical effects anymore. The cursing. I love how Stephen King got around not being able to curse on network television, because there is a lot of cursing in the book. There's a line in the beginning where...
Let me tell you something, that Omen was one vicious little son of a...
So we have this idea of propriety of language in front of the child, and it just sets up that we're not going to curse right at the beginning. A little wink to the readers and the censors, I think, in a way. Kudos. Bravo, Stephen King. Another difference I'm not really fond of is Wendy teaching Danny to read. Now, this goes back to Jack being a redeemable character. In the book, Danny has such a close relationship with his father, and his mother is actually jealous of that. That jealousy doesn't exist in the miniseries, although we do see Danny's loyalties and fondness moving from his dad to his mom as he becomes scared of his father. There's so much more to it in the book, and part of that is Jack taking the time to teach Danny how to read. But Danny's also supposed to be 5 in the book and not know how to read anything, and in the miniseries, he's 7 and he already has the basics, and I feel like it made him too smart in the movie. He needs to have that innocence and that wonder of a child, not being able to fully grasp concepts. So yeah, I have a little bit of a problem with them aging Danny up, but I also, ultimately, I don't think it hurt the story.
I suspect the invisible Tony really was a friend until you folks moved out here from Vermont, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Tony was a real friend? Wait,
It's also the name of his stuffed dog.
or was he a stuffed animal? In the book, all we get is, you know why Tony is the name, right? From the doctor after he has one of his seizures. And it's because his middle name is Anthony. It's because it is himself. The Shining, Tony is the visual hallucination representation of his psychic abilities. Why are we going to muddy things up by saying it's a real friend and then saying that he named the stuffed animal Tony? And it's too much. It's too muddied. At the end of this, we're going to see him as a teenager graduating high school, and we know, because it's the same actor, that he is Tony from the future. Tony is just Danny grown up, and I don't know why we had to muddy the waters when it came to this concept. It's not clear anymore in the miniseries. You had something good going in the book, Stephen King. Why'd you ruin it? I really miss seeing Jack tear the snowmobile apart. We get the idea. We know that he did it, right? He's there. He looks at the snowmobile. He kind of gets an idea. Then we cut to the interior of the hotel. Jack's coming back and saying, look what your son did with the spark plugs that are torn apart. Well, in the book, Jack tears it apart himself and throws the battery out into the snow because he's being inhabited by the hotel, by his alcoholism. He can't win. He can't protect his family. At that moment, he's having a moment of weakness, and we miss that in the film. And there are other moments like that, but I think the snowmobile is the best example of it. And why is he drinking whiskey? Now, as a whiskey man myself, I appreciate that. However, in the book, there's a really fun thing where he and his friend Al used to call martinis Martians, and when they would get drunk, the Martians have landed, Mr. President. And we lose all of that since he's not drinking gin martinis at the bar. When the party comes to life around him. Now, Dick's nosebleeds, they don't happen in the book. When Dick gets hit by Danny with the shine, when he's calling for help, instead he smells oranges. Well, how do you do I smell oranges visually? So I think the nosebleeds were actually a very successful way of showing that. Bravo, Stephen King. I told you that this was overall a pretty good adaptation. And then Derwent is the dog? I mean... Okay. I get it that Derwent being the dog when he stops Danny from trying to go down to the party and rescue his father, because Derwent is kind of, he's the owner of the hotel. He's the one in charge of everything. We see him, we get the sense that he's kind of pulling the strings on everything. So I get it, but it's the bisexuals are evil trope, I guess. Hi, Brony. Okay, we do get that Derwent is the fop character when we get...
Bite him once on the thigh for me, darling.
But I guess that's all they could get away with on network television. I mean, yes, I get it. We don't want to put kinky gay pup play on ABC in prime time, right? But see... Here's my problem. It's an odd thing because later we have lesbians dancing, or maybe they're not lesbians. Maybe it's just because of the costumes that they're in for the costume ball. Or maybe it's just two regular women dancing together because that happens more often than just men dancing together if they're not gay. So they were bound by censors. They were bound by ethics and TV morality of 1997, and I get all of that. But here's the thing. Without any commentary on it, and the fact that they're all ghosts, and that bisexuals are evil, and that the gays are all ghosts and they die, it just feeds into the harmful stereotypes. And here's where I have a problem with it when it comes to the adaptation. In the book, the actress that Jack is dancing with, which is not Rita Hayworth, by the way, it's just a actress. I don't think she's given a name, but she's apparently Rita Hayworth in the miniseries. I mean, kudos to you if you can get a kiss from Rita Hayworth, dead or not. I mean, I'll take one. My problem with it is she explains the AC/DC side of Horace Derwent, which is basically bisexuality. It was a term at the time. We don't use it so much anymore. And how this poor guy has been following him all over the world as a little boy toy, but he's going to be let down because Derwent will only have a relationship with women. He only sleeps with men. When she explains this in the book, there is no judgment about it. The only judgment she has on it is, oh, the poor guy, he's not very bright, is he? He should have figured this out by now. It's about the relationship, not about the kink, not about the puppy play, not about the homosexuality or the bisexuality of the respective characters. It's just, this is what's happening. By not giving us that in the film, it feeds into the harmful and negative stereotypes that we have seen forever. And I just really have a problem with that as a gay man. And I think that anyone, gay or not, should have a problem with that. And that's my political statement for the day. So to wrap things up, let's talk about the ending. First off, okay, I've already discussed that Jack kills himself in the book to save his family. He does the same in the miniseries.
Danny, run away quick! Run away quick! Remember how much I love you.
But it is a little bit different. He does have that moment of realization when he's with Danny, but the realization is, oh, I have to go dump the boiler so the hotel doesn't explode. I have to do my job, which is still the alcoholism calling him, not, oh my God, I have to protect my family. But then they added this little piece. As they are running out of the about to explode building for their lives, Danny, knowing damn well what could happen because he's seen it in a vision, just stops on the stairs with no sense of urgency whatsoever. And we know that he can use his shine because he calls Dick when he's running at another point. He doesn't have to stand still. And he says something along the lines of, Daddy, please don't let them do this.
Daddy. You can stop them, Daddy.
But it gets to Jack. He hears Danny in his head and he stands back. He doesn't dump the boiler. He lets the hotel explode. So the ending is now the same as it is in the book. Jack has sacrificed himself, albeit differently, for his son. I do think that watching him beat himself over the head to death to protect him is a little more poignant, but again, network television, right? I think that this was a creative solution to that, and it gives a direct line tie-in from Danny to Jack. Literally, in his head, a direct connection to the theme of what we pass on to our children and refusing to continue a cycle of abuse. So I appreciate that as an ending. Now coming to the epilogue. Oh my God, you guys. In the miniseries, we get Danny graduating high school. Dick has come to the graduation. He sits with Wendy. So they're all still in contact. These are good things, by the way. I know the tone of my voice is kind of betraying that idea, but these are. So he sits with Wendy. Danny gets his diploma, and we see that it is the same actor who played Tony. This is where we realize in the miniseries who Tony is, that it was Danny's vision of himself as an older, wiser, I'm not going to say kid because he's still a teenager, but an older, wiser person that comes back to try to offer advice. Right? It's how he manifested his ESP in a way that a 7-year-old child, or in the book, a 5-year-old child, can understand. And I think that moment, that realization, works well. I did listen to one podcast, I think it was Castle of Horror podcast. They're like, I don't get the time traveling Danny. See, I never got that he was time traveling. I just got that it was his vision, but maybe that's because I understood from the book going in. I don't know. I mean, they had read the book as well, but I can see how someone would think that Danny was time traveling somehow. But I do think it's clear that it's all in his head, so it's a hallucination, it's a manifestation of these powers for himself. So we get this moment, and we get Jack as a ghost, after sacrificing himself for his family. He's been, I guess, watching out for them or looking over them, and he's there to say, I love you, Jack, with the song quote, which is not the same song quote from the book. It's Creedence Clearwater Revival, Bad Moon Rising, that keeps coming back, among others. This one is...
Kissing.
Yeah, that's what I've been missing.
I always hear Barbara in my head. Kissing, ooh, what I've been missing. Love a man away. Can you be? That was terrible. Go find Barbra Streisand doing it. Anyway, the song is coming back, which we've heard through as a running theme, a motif, if you will, for the entire movie, just like we get it with a different song in the book. So I love that. Now, in the book, the ending is only a year later. It's not 10 years later. Wendy and Danny are at a outdoor resort place where Dick Halloran is working, so they're still together. And Dick is saying, so what are you guys going to do? Do you think Danny's going to be okay? And it's, well, it's been a year. I guess we'll be okay. No one knows. And I think that's the point of the novel, is that we do our best to not pass on the negative things to our children, to the next generation, but all we can do is hope. All we can do is hope that they come out well after being exposed to our demons that we try our damnedest not to expose them to. So I think the ending, while the theme is retained in the movie, and the theme is actually a little bit stronger, I think, for it in the film, I think the ending and the sense of what will happen in the future is negated entirely. So I'm not a huge fan of the ending, but I also don't have a big problem with it. I do wish they had retained the original novel ending. You coming over here, Bruni? Nope, you're going down? Okay, we don't have to worry about a cat getting in the shot again. All right, guys, that was it. That was my adaptation correlation. Before I rate this, I want to tell you that in terms of theme, it is damn near perfect. In terms of plot, it is fairly close to perfect. But because of the omission of the bicycle, because of the omission of Al Shockley as a larger character, and a few other characters that are a little bit more prominent, because of the few other things I started trying to list and realized that they were so minute and just little minutia that didn't really matter so much, except they bother me. I'm cutting all of that out and just telling you I can't give this a full 5 stars. I just can't. I can't bring myself to do it. I will give the 1997 miniseries adaptation of the 1977 novel The Shining 4.5 stars as an adaptation. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Adaptation Correlation here in David's Den. Next up, we're going to be tackling Night Shift, the first anthology of short stories by Stephen King, the very first of which is Jerusalem's Lot, which is the short story that the current epic series Chapelwaite is based on. So I'm going to start doing some episode reactions for that. I'm getting really excited. I watched the pilot episode last night, and it's good. I mean, it's definitely a based on rather than adapted from kind of adaptation, but I'm really enjoying it so far after 1 episode, so I'm going to give you all my thoughts on that. Hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss that or any of the other Night Shift stuff. I'm going to be reading all of the stories in the book while this is my book, you see that? While I'm on the train and then the subway on the way to work, and then I'm going to be doing vlog-style videos where I'm on the walk to work. I'm just going to kind of talk to you guys about my thoughts. And then if there's a film adaptation, which there are a lot of, we will stop and do a more in-depth adaptation correlation video like this one. So hit subscribe so you don't miss any of those. And if you want to follow me on any of my social media, I post lots of photos of the cats and the hamsters on Instagram and Twitter, along with Stephen King stuff. And there's even some other endeavors, if that gives it away, that not all of you may be interested in, but I do cater to Stephen King fans there as well. You can check all of that out down in the link tree in the description. See you guys next time.